I would like to start by acknowledging that we're on the unceded, shared traditional territory of the Squamish and Lillooet Nation here. I know it's an online event, so many of you may be on other lands and traditional territories, and I want to acknowledge that as well. I will start sharing my screen now and give an overview of the agenda. Just 1 second. Okay. So tonight we are having the Electrify Your Sea to Sky Commute Burning Questions webinar. Welcome. My name is Louisa. I'm the Climate Action Coordinator for the Resort Municipality of Whistler. I have other speakers here with me. We will start with a couple of shorter presentations and then go into a question and answer period just after 8 o'clock. With me here is Ian Picketts, the Manager for Sustainability and Climate Change for the District of Squamish. Then also one of our speakers is Michael Stanheyer, who is the Program Coordinator for the Fraser Basin Council, as well as the Administrator for the Emotive Provincial Campaign. We have 3 fantastic EV ambassadors with us, and they will introduce themselves later. That's Lori Pine, Holden Bonwit, and Sarah Waukee, and they will share their stories and why they decided to make the shift to an electric vehicle. I will pass it over to Ian right now.
Thank you so much, Louisa, and thank you so much to everyone for joining us on this not so sunny evening. There's a lot of things we'd like to get out of this venue tonight, but mostly we were just hoping to provide a forum for people to learn with experts, to ask questions, and also to gain site-specific knowledge about EVs, mostly in the Lower Mainland region. We'd like to debunk some myths, but also acknowledge some challenges associated with EVs. And one thing that's important to note is that no one on this call is representing any sort of brand or any sort of particular model or type of EV. We're just all enthusiasts who want to share information and are excited about this. So the bigger question and your answers to the multiple choice, it's pretty clear that everyone is pretty on board. It's not to be cool, but it's about climate action is what's driving most of us to be here, literally and figuratively. We all know about the imperative for climate action. Both Squamish and Whistler have declared climate emergencies and recognize the imperative to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. We all know that the window to act is still open. It's very important to remember that, but it is not a big window, and we only have until about 2030 to start making really meaningful emissions reductions. So we really want to avoid harmful and negative climate impacts, and we really want to come under those negative positive feedback cycles, which can cause runaway climate change. All that's pretty heavy, but yeah, it's important to think about this. That's underlying this conversation. To me, it really makes me think of both international and intergenerational equity. What is our responsibility? Most of us are in quite lucky situations with where we live and how we live. Could you go to the next slide, please? So to just give some contextual information about Squamish, as I noted before, Council declared it a climate emergency in 2019. And in 2020, we released our Community Climate Action Plan, or CCAP. So this plan consists of 6 big moves, which relate to strategies and actions oriented towards waste, transportation, and buildings. Transportation is equivalent to over 50% of our emissions in Squamish, so it's a very, very high priority for action. And as you'll notice in this diagram, there's 2 actions related to transportation. One is to decarbonize transportation, which we're talking about tonight, and the other one is to shift beyond the car. And that relates to active transportation, it relates to density, it relates to people working locally, and it also relates to both local and regional transit. It's really important for us to all remember that although EVs are a very important part of the solution, we really want to encourage density, we transportation. And on that note, I'll remind everyone it is Go by Bike Week, so I encourage you to get out and get out with your kids. GoByBikeBC.ca. You can win a lot of great prizes. And most importantly, if you're from Squamish, we really want to beat Whistler this year. So if you're from Whistler, you don't have to do that. Just go ahead and drive. No, don't actually. Next slide, please. So as you can see on our left, transportation makes up more than 50% of Squamish's community emissions, so very significant. And our goal, as articulated in the CCAP, is for 50% of passenger vehicles and 10% of fleet vehicles to be electrified or similarly low carbon. On the right, you can see ICBC data that shows registered electrical vehicles in Squamish. So the numbers are still somewhat small. However, you can see a very, very heartening trend toward this, quite a logarithmic increase. And so if you were to follow this line upward, I'm certainly very optimistic that we are going to meet and hopefully exceed these targets by 2030. So a lot of really positive momentum and a lot of really exciting technologies coming down the pipe. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview, we have 22 publicly available charging stations in Squamish. We are updating our zoning bylaw requirements so that new houses are required to have electric vehicle charging capacity, all new residences and commercial buildings. We also have quite an ambitious municipal energy and emissions plan that has some very bold targets for fleet electrification. Because of our growing population and the number of municipal buildings that we need to construct, that's one of the main ways that we need to drive down our municipal emissions. So we have some goals far beyond that 10% that we've recently adopted. So toward that, we're doing a fleet assessment using telematics, which is essentially sophisticated GPS equipment that tells you where and how you drive all vehicles and is going to help inform our future fleet planning. So that's one, that's also brought in from support of Plug-in BC. So we appreciate that support. And also with, in conjunction with Squamish and also Lillooet, we've applied for a major infrastructure expansion project, a Sea to Sky network. And if we're successful in this, with significant help from both provincial and federal governments, we're going to see a really big uptick in vehicle charging stations. Yeah, I think I will leave it at that and pass it over to you. Thank you, Louisa.
Thank you, Ian. Sorry, I didn't want to skip prematurely there. Yeah, so that was a climate action in Squamish. I will just say a couple of words about climate action in Whistler. Similar to Squamish, we have really accelerated our Squamish action initiatives last year. In December last year, in December 2020, we have adopted the Climate Action Big Move strategy that takes the actions from our community energy and climate plan that we feel have the highest impact to really prioritize and accelerate our GHG emission reduction initiatives. The Climate Action Big Move strategy consists of 6 big moves, with Big Move 1, getting people out of the car, moving beyond the car. Our priority is not to replace every combustion engine vehicle with an EV. Our priority is to get people out of the car, onto their bikes, onto the Valley Trail, walking, into buses wherever possible. The people who still need to drive, we would really like to see electrification and decarbonization of that. So our Big Move 2 is to decarbonize passenger vehicles. Also, we want to address visitor emissions, existing buildings and new buildings, and move towards a circular economy. In September this year, so just as of this month, we have launched our Small Steps for Big Moves outreach campaign. You will find that on our website under Whistler/climate action/small steps. Each month we have a topic. September is Let's Consider Electric, where you find a wealth of resources. You can share your stories and win prizes, and just really can connect each month on a different climate-related topic. The September month will also be the location where you find the recording for this webinar and lots of other amazing resources when it comes to electric vehicles in Whistler and the Sea to Sky corridor. Similar to Squamish, in Whistler too, passenger transportation or passenger vehicles is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. And that is why we really want to bring these emissions down and get people into electric vehicles and support wherever possible. So our big move to goal is that 50% of kilometers driven within Whistler are zero emission vehicles, and that is mostly electric vehicles now. Just what are we up to? What are the actions related to electric vehicles right now? So currently, the municipality owns and operates 34 municipal charging stations in the day lots, day lot 4, 2, and 1, at Municipal Hall, the Conference Center underground and surface parking lot, at the Public Works Yard, and the Meadowpark Sports Center. We have just started phase 1 of our user fee strategy. We have started to implement a fee of $1 per hour at the chargers that are not on the day lots. As of next winter, as of December, the ski season, we will start to implement a fee at the day lots of $1 per hour. But we've recognized that it's not realistic during a ski day or during a work day to come and unplug your charger. So we'll cap this to $5 per day. $5 per day for a full charge, as long as you want, which according to our math makes it still much cheaper than a combustion engine vehicle, but incentivizes turnover and makes sure there's space for people to charge when they really need it. Other actions underway are that we have applied for funding together with the District of Squamish to really upgrade our electric vehicle network, charging network. So we want to have more level 2 chargers in the day lots and more fast chargers, and we're working towards that. Also, we're working towards an e-mobility strategy to identify how many public chargers do we want and how can we support home charging as well in stratas and single family homes. We're also working towards electrifying our own fleet to lead by example, and all new houses will need to have electric vehicle capacity. And with that, I would like to pass it on to Michael from Emotive BC.
Thanks, Louisa. My name is Michael Stanier, and I work for an organization called the Fraser Basin Council, which is a not-for-profit organization with offices all over BC. I mainly work in something called the Emotive BC provincial campaign, and that is it's kind of a grassroots thing that is funded by the government now. Though I'm not on the inside, so I can maybe answer a few questions about policy, but manage your expectations there. But what we do is mostly we do vehicle demonstration events and help people connect with current electric vehicle owners and drivers in their communities. Myself, I grew up and spent most of my life in northern BC, and that's where I kind of fell in love with electric vehicles. And saw how much they made sense. I spent a couple years working in Vancouver, and now I live near Courtenay on Vancouver Island in the Comox territory. But through my work, I do get to drive a lot of vehicles in a lot of different conditions, and I'm lucky to pick up demo cars sometimes and take them out for a test as well. So I really want to just run you through kind of some of the broad basics about electric vehicles in BC, and then we'll hear from some local drivers. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I want to talk about is charging infrastructure, because this has really exploded in BC, especially over the last couple years. It's made things like driving from say Vancouver to Revelstoke or Vancouver to Prince George, just a normal thing that people do, not sort of a science experiment that it may have been 4 or 5 years ago. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is a screenshot from a website called PlugShare. There's a website or the app, and it shows the just kind of the amount of charging stations that are out there and the coverage that we're getting now. So most of the major highways do have charging stations, and you'll see that there's orange icons and green icons, orange representing fast chargers or Tesla superchargers in the case of Tesla, and green representing level 2 chargers. And we'll get into what those differences are. Let's go to the next slide. The interesting thing about PlugShare is that you can view charging station information in real time. So if someone is using a charging station, you'll see that. If charging stations are kind of undergoing construction, you can see that there's going to be something on your route soon. And you can see on the left side of the screenshot, there's the filters for different types of plugs. And it looks complicated if you're not already in the EV world with all these different types of plugs, but it really comes down to essentially, do you drive a Tesla or do you drive something else? But yeah, we'll go over all those different plug types. So let's go to the next slide. The first type of charger is what's known as a level 1 charger, and every electric vehicle comes with this. It's essentially an adapter so that you can charge in a normal 110 wall outlet. And this is going to get you typically between 8 to 10 kilometers of driving range per hour. It's the slowest method. For most commuters, it's going to cover your daily commuting. But I know in the case of people traveling from, say, Squamish to Whistler, this is not going to really cover that daily charging in most cases. If you have a big enough battery, you can sort of recharge on the weekend using this method. But it's still handy if you have a place to charge at work from a normal wall outlet, or if you're visiting family and friends overnight and want to charge as well. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk about level 2 chargers, which are what people will typically have installed in their home. And you'll see them installed around the community at parks and community centers, workplaces as well. So these are like they're a small kind of wall box usually that will go on the wall in your garage, and will give you about 20 to 40 kilometers of range per hour of charging. And you can get them hardwired in, or if you have like an existing dryer plug, or I guess in your garage more like a welding plug or a heater plug, you can get them outfitted with the appropriate plugins so that you can just plug them into what you already have. And there are rebates to purchase and install these charging stations. You'll see that on the right-hand side, there's the illustration of what the plug actually looks like, the J1772 or J plug. Except for if you have a Tesla, then you just use the Tesla plug. And that's the only thing that you need to use with Tesla. If you have a Tesla and you pull up to a public charging station that uses the J1772 nozzle, you do have a little adapter that comes with every Tesla. So you'll be able to charge at any level 2 station, whether it's Tesla or public. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so level 3 chargers or fast charging stations are also called direct current fast chargers. And these are the ones that are kind of like refrigerator-sized charging stations that you'll see in rest stops, sometimes at parking lots at malls, see them at more and more gas stations, which is kind of neat. And they have 2 plugs, either CCS or CHAdeMO. And virtually every station is going to have one of each of those plugs, as you can see in the photo up top. So unless it's unless your vehicle is a Tesla, it'll have one of those plugs. So these public fast chargers are basically made to accommodate everyone. Just keep in mind, most plug-in hybrids, which we'll get to later, and some of the older electric vehicles do not have fast charging capabilities. So they're not going to have one of the fast charging plugs, meaning that you can't plug into one of these stations and even get the trickle charge from it. Now, not all of these are made equally. Their output ranges from 25 kilowatts to up to 350 kilowatts. And so regardless of what vehicle you have, as long as it can accept fast charging, you can pull up to a high-powered station and use it even if your vehicle doesn't accept, say, up to 350 kilowatts, which most of them at this point don't. You can still use it, you just won't be able to take advantage of the really fast charging. Most vehicles out there right now accept between 50 to 100, 150 kilowatts. So it's of course really helpful to have that higher range of charging on your vehicle, but you don't need it to use the fast charging stations. And basically, when you pull up and you plug into one of these, your vehicle and the charging station do a lot of communicating to make sure that they're not going to output more damage than your battery can, or output more power than your battery can take, and take any damage that way. So let's move on to the next slide. Just to quickly recap here, on the left, we've got a fast charging station for what we call level 3, and it's going to use the CHAdeMO and CCS plugs, which are on everything except for Tesla vehicles. Tesla drivers can get a CHAdeMO adapter so that you can still use those public stations. And then next to that, we've got an example of a level 2 public station. So those are the slower ones using the J plug. And then also there's the Tesla adapter to use those. Oh, and I should point out, you might notice that the J plug and CCS plug kind of looks similar. CCS just has another connection on the bottom. If you have a vehicle that uses the CHAdeMO plug for fast charging, you're going to have both the CHAdeMO socket and the J plug socket in your little panel that you open up to charge. The Tesla counterparts both use the Tesla plugs. So Teslas just have the one place to plug in. And you can see an example there of the Tesla supercharger, and then examples of the destination chargers, which are smaller wall boxes, the equivalent to level 2 stations. And important to keep in mind is, as of now, Teslas can use adapters to charge at public stations, but non-Tesla vehicles cannot use any of the Tesla stations. And that's for now, because Tesla has sort of hinted at opening up their superchargers and destination chargers to other vehicles in the future. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, with charging kind of established, let's talk about the variety and availability of vehicles, because this has really exploded over the last couple years. It's really sort of a new world out there compared to when I started formally working in this space 2 years ago. And there's a whole lot more new stuff to come over the next few years. So let's get into it in the next slide. I want to just go through some of the terminology about the types of electric vehicles out there. So we're probably all familiar with something like the Toyota Prius, a regular hybrid, which uses some of the electric vehicle technology in that it has an electric motor that helps out the gas motor. It has a very small battery, and it uses regenerative braking to put a little power into the battery when you're slowing down, and then use that to help out the gas motor. But it can't plug in, and it's always still, for the most part, using gas to support its electrical system, which does make it more efficient, but we don't generally consider it an electric vehicle. But there are vehicles that we call plug-in hybrids, and they're a lot like a regular hybrid like the Prius, except that they just have a bigger battery so that they can actually plug in when you're at home or at work and give you a pretty substantial kind of commuting number of kilometers that you can drive around purely on electric. And after that, they switch really seamlessly just into being like a normal hybrid until you get to plug in again. And there's a variation on that called extended range plug-in hybrid, which uses not like a gas motor to drive the vehicle, but a little gas generator to supplement the electrical system. Next, we have full-on battery electric vehicles. They're really simple. They're probably what most people think of when they think about electric cars. And it's just a battery and one or more motors. And lumped into this, we do kind of consider the fuel cell electric or fuel cell vehicles, like hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, to be electric because they use a lot of the electric components. But just in interest of time tonight, we're not really going to get into the fuel cell stuff. So let's go to the next slide. And yeah, just give you some more details on fully battery electric vehicles. So like I said, it's just battery and motor or motors, really simplified forms of getting around. There's no shifting except for maybe a couple really like high-end performance related vehicles that have a 2-speed transmission, but which is automatic, of course. But yeah, right now they're mostly just super smooth to drive, plenty of power. It's kind of surreal when you get in one for the first time because you're waiting for that little sort of lurch as it shifts, which never happens. They also have fast deceleration due to regenerative braking. And I saw some questions earlier kind of wondering about how regenerative braking works. So that has nothing to do with the brake pads and rotors and calipers. What happens on an electric vehicle is the engine can be kind of used as a turbine, or not the engine, sorry, the electric motor can be used kind of like a turbine to just pump some or generate some electricity that goes back into the battery when you're slowing down. And then the resistance from that process slows the vehicle down as well. So the brakes, the actual physical like pads and rotors don't get used very much. Right now, like we learned from our poll earlier, there are ranges up to 650 kilometers and the charging speeds and the ranges are increasing. An example there is the very ubiquitous Tesla Model 3 Standard Range Plus, which I'm sure many of you recognize from out on the highways and around town. So let's move on to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about plug-in hybrid vehicles. Yeah, much like a regular hybrid, they have a gas and electric drivetrain that works together, but they just have a bigger battery. They can plug in and they can drive around on EV only mode for a while. Since their batteries are not as big as, sorry, sip of water here. Since their batteries aren't as big as the fully battery electric vehicles, most of these do not have fast charging capabilities, but they still have like that J-plug input, so you can charge from a level 2 charger. Let's go to the next slide. Like I mentioned, there are a few of these models, and I think you're just going to be finding them used at this point. extended range vehicles. And it's a really kind of eloquent take on the plug-in hybrid kind of idea. They are fully electric, but they have a little gas generator and a little gas tank to provide a bit of extra range. So the gas system never powers the vehicle directly. It just uses that generator, which is a really efficient way to supplement the electric system. And they do have larger batteries than most plug-in hybrids. So the vehicle will very rarely need gas. Okay, let's keep going. Next slide. We, on the emotivebc.ca site, we try and keep track of every vehicle out there and its price and its current range. So you can go there and find the link on the main page of emotivebc.ca to get an idea of what is out there. And people are often surprised by the variety of stuff that's on the road. You'll probably recognize some Tesla models and maybe some of the older Leafs. But there's quite a lot of vehicles out there now that just look like just another Volkswagen, just another Hyundai or Kia. So people are generally surprised about the variety of electric vehicles that you can get in BC. Let's go to the next slide. And here is here's just a sample of the plug-in hybrid page from that booklet as well. And
just a quick note to compliment Michael. I've put the link to what he's looking at in the Q&A if you want to scroll down to that question about pricing, and you'll find some links there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so there's an idea of the variety of electric and or fully electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles out there. Let's go to the next slide. And of course, some of the stuff coming up in the future. Everyone is super excited for trucks. So we've got trucks just rolling off assembly lines now from Rivian, which is a startup. There's the Ford F-150 Lightning, which you've probably seen in the news. The Tesla Cybertruck as well. Just some examples of trucks that we're going to be seeing soon. And then some crossovers from Kia and Hyundai that'll be out next year. Those are exciting because they're built on a really fast charging platform. And people are always wondering about vans too. Volkswagen has committed to bringing back kind of their camper van style of vehicle with something called the ID Buzz. So you know, if you're in that camp of you're looking for a truck, you're going to be waiting a little bit, but it's still a good time to learn about kind of general electric vehicle technologies and maybe preparing your home as well. So thanks for joining us, even if you're waiting to get a truck in the next couple of years. Let's move on to the next slide. And I do want to emphasize that you know, the switch to electric vehicles is going to be kind of gradual. BC does have a Zero Emission Vehicles Act with some targets there, and more aggressive targets have been thrown around at the federal level and by other provinces. And I don't know, you know, if BC is going to necessarily revise this, or if they just sort of like adopt maybe something more aggressive that comes down federally. But BC was the first in Canada to do this. And so the provinces are always kind of playing leapfrog to see who can do it best. But those are the targets that we have right now. So we'll be, you know, a gradual shift to getting to 100% of new vehicles being electric. But I imagine that if you're on this call tonight, you're probably looking to do that sooner than later. So so thanks for that. And yeah, glad you could make it. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, we're going to go through real briefly what we call kind of like facts and myths, And I just want to preface this with a lot of the things that sort of come out as being myths about electric vehicles. I think usually start as a like an intuitive concern, and sometimes get played up in the media a little bit to the point where they become a myth. But I never want to dismiss people's concerns as being a myth, because I think they generally come from like a fairly logical place. So let's just start off. I think we're talking about range anxiety first. So let's go to that one. Oh, sorry. We're going to talk about winter first. People all over the province have been using electric vehicles in the winter without issue, really. And there are some distinct advantages of doing so. So let's go to the next slide. So you've probably heard about range reduction that happens in the winter. That comes from a few places. A little bit just that the roads are slippery, and winter tires are a bit heavier, so you're losing a little bit of range there. Some of it also comes from especially the earlier electric vehicles using just like an electric heater to heat the cabin. And not really being designed with snowy, wintry climates in mind. You'll see newer vehicles even get like a special Canadian market package so that they're using heat pumps and being equipped with more like heated steering wheels and heated seats, so that you don't have to use essentially an electric heater to heat your cabin. But I do want to also just point out that the battery ranges are becoming so big that, even with longer commutes, it's just not really an issue, especially coupled with more and more fast chargers and higher charging speeds. So, any range reductions, if you're on a road trip, kind of come down to just maybe an inconvenience of having to wait a little bit longer at a fast charger, as opposed to like an anxiety about you're going to be stranded somewhere. Oh, and I should mention, while we're on the topic of winter, some of the benefits of the electric vehicle. One, and maybe one of the most important ones from people who are really in really cold climates in BC, is that the electric motor doesn't have to turn over. It doesn't have to push around engine oil that gets cold or anything like that. So it's always able to just turn on. So you don't have that, sort of anxiety or struggle to get the vehicle started. Also, you're able to, I guess, idle in a way without producing any emissions. So you can have your vehicle heated up in your garage or, on a ferry, something like that. So you're able to just kind of like have it turned on and staying warm in situations where you wouldn't normally have that with a gas vehicle. And then in terms of handling, electric vehicles have a lot of battery weight that sits down low in the car, and that provides just the sheer weight provides traction. And the not to get too technical here, but the electric motors, they do, they're able to perform really advanced traction control a lot quicker than like a combustion engine system would be able to do that. So they do handle really great in the winter. And keep in mind that the Teslas, like the cheapest Tesla, the Model 3 Standard Range Plus, is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, and people are using them, all over the province in the winter. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, I know this is a big topic, the savings from electric vehicles. So let's jump into that. If you're charging at home, getting 100 kilometers of driving range out of your electric vehicle is typically going to cost around $2 to $3 in electricity. So you can probably quite readily compare that to what you would get in a gas car. You're probably more around $10, $8 to $10 even for a pretty efficient gas car to get 100 kilometers of driving. And electric vehicles just have, thousands fewer parts. And all the stuff that you'd kind of maintain regularly on the gas car, like the spark plugs and filters and hoses and belts, that is for the most part eliminated. Electric vehicles, they still have your washer fluid. You're still going to have to eventually replace your suspension, and you're going to have to still take care of your brakes a bit. But a lot of that kind of fluids and belts and whatnot is gone. Of course, the entire exhaust and emissions system, you don't have to worry about that anymore. And it does get rid of complicated all-wheel drive systems. Electric vehicles, many of them do still have all-wheel drive options, but they're accomplished just by using multiple motors, like one in the front and one in the back, or even moving towards one for each wheel. But you don't have that drive shaft going down the vehicle and serve just a lot of complicated mechanical parts. So let's go to the next slide. These are just taken from BC Hydro's website, a quick kind of comparison of fuel savings. Now, when you're looking at these, the Volkswagen e-Golf and the Model 3, these aren't being compared to each other. These are being compared to similar gas vehicles. So the Volkswagen e-Golf would be compared to a Volkswagen Golf, and a Model 3 would be compared to like some sort of BMW. But you can see there, the e-Golf, you could expect to save around $900 a year on fuel. The Model 3, again, being compared to a more consumptive gas vehicle, you're looking at around like 1,800, and that's based on 40 kilometers a day, which I know most people on this call are probably doing more. So you'd be saving a tremendous amount of fuel and a tremendous amount of money on fuel. So let's go to the next slide. I just want to quickly run through the rebates for purchasing a vehicle and how they work. These are for new vehicles for the most part. So the provincial one under Clean BC, you're looking at up to $3,000, and from the federal rebate, you're looking at $5,000. These are point of purchase rebates, so you don't have to fill out any paperwork. The dealership does that. Just keep in mind that it's a rebate, it's not a price reduction. So you pay tax on whatever your purchase price is, and then receive the rebate immediately after that on the actual transaction. You may have heard about something called Scrap It, where you can scrap an older vehicle and get up to $6,000 rebate. This one requires you to apply, get approved, and then it's also available in limited quantities. So you'd have to check with the dealership and make sure that they have a Scrap It token or a Scrap It coupon available. So there is a bit of paperwork and some planning involved in that one. And I just did want to quickly mention that there's something called the Specialty Use Vehicle Incentive, kind of switching gears from cars here. That covers a variety of vehicles, from buses and delivery trucks and ice resurfacers, right down to low-speed vehicles like scooters and with some other stuff like ATVs, as well as electric motorcycles as well. So if you're kind of interested in any of that other stuff, and a lot of it is going electric, you can look up the Specialty Use Vehicle Incentive. Let's go to the next slide. And then on the home charger side, there are rebates for your, doing a simple home installation, up to $350 or 50% of the cost to install a level 2 charging station. So virtually everyone is going to max out that $350. doing the installation. There's also rebates for multi-unit residential buildings and for workplaces that $2,000 per level 2 station. There's also, I want to point out, sort of a different funding stream for multi-unit residential buildings where you have someone come in and they prepare an EV ready plan. And then, you act on that plan, and basically EV ready means not purchasing the charging stations, but everything that has to come before the charging stations, all the, panel upgrades and wiring, and basically getting it to the point where you have like junction boxes at all the parking stalls. So there are rebates for that whole process too. And you can contact the EV advisor at Plug-in BC for that. Or if you contact me at Emotive, and we'll have this information available later, then I'll connect you with the right people. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And yeah, I just want to, I think most people get this, but yeah, the emissions from electric vehicles are way, way lower than gas vehicles over their lifetimes, especially in BC, where there's virtually no emissions from our electrical grid. So let's just go to the next slide. Yeah, I think unless you're like really, really digging into electric vehicles, it's probably not apparent just how efficient they are. They're about 3 times more efficient than gas vehicles, and what I mean by that is with the energy that they're given, they just go further on that energy. Whereas a gas vehicle, its engine is only about 20 to 30% efficient, meaning for every liter of fuel that is burned, it only makes use of about 20 to 30% of the energy in that liter of gasoline. Again, electric vehicles, don't idle when you're sitting in traffic. They're just on, but they're not, using extra power. And you do make some electricity when you hit the brakes or when you're descending a hill. Greenhouse gas reductions vary by power source around the world, but electric vehicles are so just sheerly efficient with what they're given that they're always cleaner than driving on gas. And like I said, BC does have a very, very clean grid, with the majority of it coming from hydro. And then, over their lifetimes, they will produce like 99% less greenhouse gases. If we consider the lifetime of a vehicle to be 150,000 kilometers, which, let's be honest, isn't very much. So as you drive more and more, getting up to that 250,000 kilometer range, you're just still, avoiding immense amounts of emissions. So let's go to the next slide. And yeah, I just really want to briefly reiterate that most electric cars out there are going to have a range of 300 to 600 kilometers now if you're buying new. On the average around BC, people drive less than 50 kilometers a day, though I know if you're commuting from Squamish to Whistler, you're going to be driving a lot more than that. And I think that's probably what motivates people to really start looking at this. I think people with longer commutes are probably, the best use case for electric vehicles, for their own personal benefits around their cost savings, especially. Let's just go to the next slide. And something that we've done to illustrate this is on the emotivebc.ca website. We have stories from people from all over BC who send us their photos and a brief example of what they've been doing with their electric vehicle, really to illustrate that people use it to get into the backcountry, to drive it year round in harsh winter conditions, and they'll usually have some sort of account of what they've saved on fuel and maintenance as well. So I think that makes a pretty natural segue into speaking with some of our local drivers. So I want to hand it over to our EV ambassadors from the area.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. Very interesting. There were a lot of questions coming in. And I also want to make sure to point out that we have received your questions. Some of you have submitted questions when registering. We have received them, we have compiled them, and we have tried to address them. We have passed them on to Michael, and he has them. So some of the themes with the winter driving come specifically from your questions when registering. And we will pass it now to the ambassadors. And then we have time for a Q&A thereafter, where we can discuss some of the questions you have asked in the Q&A, and you can speak up, and we can, if Holden has missed 1 or 2 points, he's doing a fantastic job there. I'm over the moon. Then we can talk about that too. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen. And I would like to invite our first EV ambassador, Lori Pine, to just introduce herself and give her the floor. You're muted, Lori, sorry.
Hi, thanks. My name is Lori. I am honored to live in Squamish Nation, and I work towards reciprocity and truth every day in what I do in my conversations with people. I'm happy to drive up and down the corridor of Lilwat Nation and Squamish Nation every day. 5 days a week I do that. I own a Chevrolet Volt. I moved from Whistler about 4 years ago, and to be very truthful, it was a change I made because of money. The environment clearly means something to me, but it was very, very expensive. It was about $450 a month in fuel I was spending. My job is meaningful to me, and so I chose and choose to keep driving. And I got an electric vehicle 2.5 years ago, and it's spectacular. I can sleep inside it. I only trickle charge it at night. I use a level 1 charger only. That's all I need for my commute to Whistler. I do live in a townhouse, and it was challenging to get a level 2 charger into my townhouse. My power box is on the 3rd floor. I don't know why they did that, but definitely I love you guys are changing bylaws and building permits to suit those. Clearly my place was built before that. It's been great in the snow. It's really great in the snow. What else? There's so many things I was trying to think of, Michael, when you were talking. It's like, yeah, I have to mention that. I have to mention that.
Lori, you mentioned your fuel cost before is around $450 a month. Do you know approximately what you spend now?
I do. I plug in at night. My husband and I have figured out, we think it's about $1.40 a day. The voltage it pulls from our electricity grid is about what a toaster is if you're plugging in a toaster. My understanding of a supercharger is a little more like plugging in a refrigerator. That's my understanding, but I can trickle charge my vehicle. I can't fast charge it. I have a Chevrolet Volt, and my ability is only to charge up to level 2. What else? Can anyone prompt me on anything else I can mention?
I think you're really selling it here. I'm really grateful we're so grateful to have such an experience. Yeah.
One other thing I did at our place of work was I applied for a grant to BC Hydro and got a grant for our workplace. It did not cover the entire installation, but most of it. We got almost $2,000, and it was just over $3,000. And that is for me to charge and anyone else who wants to charge. We currently have the only charger in Function Junction in Whistler, BC. But the only problem that comes up for me is if I have to go all the way to Vancouver. My car is full EV, but I have a little special generator. They're now not sold anymore. But mine has a generator that charges my battery, so it doesn't run the drivetrain of my car. So if I had to use my generator, which I don't need to for my commute, but if I had to use it to go further, I get 100 kilometers for 1 liter of gas. So still way cheaper than a gas mobile. But I will say, for my commute from Squamish to Whistler, I do not use fuel ever. Mic drop.
Fantastic. So there's one question in the Q&A to the ambassadors that you addressed already, but just for the others, what's the downside of EV ownership in your opinion? So I will just pass it on now, if that's okay, to Holden, our next ambassador, Holden Bonwit. I let you introduce yourself and your EV story.
Yeah, sure. Hi, folks. I'm Holden. I live in Squamish after moving up from Vancouver last year. And I am an engineer by background. I actually worked on electric vehicle charging systems for a number of years, and got to test and drive a lot of different electric vehicles. This was around 2010 when the first flood was coming of the Nissan Leaf and Tesla's Roadster and the Volt and a couple of others. We also tested BMW's Mini Cooper and Mitsubishi's i-MiEV and all these others. They were kind of the first cadre of vehicles, and I would call those kind of compromise vehicles. And now we're in this like tail end of the second generation vehicles that are kind of approaching this no compromise vehicle that has really good battery management. So you have a long lifetime and great range and that kind of thing. And I'm really excited for what's coming in the next few years, where we'll actually just have even more affordable vehicles coming onto the market with great range. So my first electric car was a Nissan Leaf 2016, and it had some battery range issues. But I was saving up the whole time for what we have now, which is the Tesla Model Y. It's the kind of crossover SUV. And even back in 2010, I knew there would be a car coming along that like we've all been waiting for. And I feel like this is it. It's so much fun to drive. And the downside, somebody asked in the Q&A, of electric vehicles, in my opinion, are maybe mainly around upfront price and range for road trips, but they're solvable if you look at the total cost of ownership of your vehicle over 5 or 10 years. And also, like somebody said, on a road trip, you may charge a little more often, but a lot of people report actually enjoying your 6-hour or 8-hour road trip even better because you've stretched your legs more and that kind of thing, for 15 minutes here and there. So maybe the third downside is that I haven't been in a gas station in a few years, so I didn't get to buy any like corn nuts or other cheap snacks that I never buy. But I really love it. And I think if you're interested in EV, try and find someone who has one in your neighborhood or in your network, and just ask them maybe if you could go for a ride. And if you know them well, maybe if you can drive it around the block, because there's something very, very different and smooth about these vehicles that's really hard to communicate. So that might really change your mind if the environmental numbers don't. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Holden. There are a couple of questions coming up in the chat, but we keep them for after. So interesting. And I love the passion that you have when you talk about your car. I'm not sure if I'm if I could talk about my car like that. So it's really selling me. Okay, our last EV ambassador is Sarah. Sarah Walkie, I leave it to you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your EV story.
So my name is Sarah. I live in Squamish. I work in Whistler, Pemberton, and surrounding areas. So sometimes when I'm working outside of Pemberton, my daily commute is up to 200 kilometers round trip. I kind of got an EV a little bit by accident. I like to say it was like the most expensive impulse purchase of my life. I had a Toyota Matrix before this, and I was spending between $500 and $700 a month on gas for my commute. And it was getting to the point where I was starting to have a lot of issues and breakdowns, and it was really unpredictable for me how much it was going to cost every month. And I really wanted a car that would be safe and reliable to get me back and forth from work, especially in the winter. but I couldn't really afford to buy a good enough car outright, and I couldn't really afford gas and a payment and insurance. And so at that time, I was actually just able to eliminate the cost of fuel. For the 3 years that I've owned my car, I have been charging my car for free in the Whistler Day lot. So thank you, RMOW, for that. I know Louisa was mentioning earlier that that is changing in the near future. I guess this is one of the benefits of being an early adopter. I drive a Chevrolet Bolt. I absolutely love my car. It's fully electric. I commute in the winter in it all the time. It's our preferred car for when myself and my partner are going skiing on the weekends. You know, just last week, I drove up to Whistler for work. I came back. No, I think I drove up to Whistler, Pemberton, back to Squamish, and then down to Vancouver to go out for dinner with my sister, like all in the same day. So I'm getting, and you know, I did charge while I was in Whistler, but I've got lots of mileage. I don't really ever have any concerns about it. I would say one of the downsides is there's a little bit more planning involved. And certainly if you get to a point where you're pretty low and you have a long commute, that trickle charge overnight at your house is not going to be enough to get back the next day. So I have had, you know, a few panicky moments and late nights where I've been waiting for a public charger to become available. But in the 3 years that I've had my car, that landscape has changed so drastically with so many more chargers available, and so many more vehicles on the market. When I got my car, like the only thing I could get that had enough range for me that wasn't a Tesla was the Bolt. That was it. I really didn't have a choice. I didn't test drive anything. I didn't do any research. I just was like, find me a car. Like it was 2018, only the second year they made them, there were hardly any available. I was like, give me one, I'll give you my blood. Like, let's call it a day. So it turned out to be, fortunately, a decision that I'm really pleased with, despite the fact that it was more of a lack of decision. So yeah, I'm very happy, and I don't think I will ever own a gas vehicle again.
What a statement. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much to the ambassadors. Yeah, it's fantastic to hear how the success stories. I just asked that question to you too, Sarah. So before opening up all the questions, what do you think is a downside of EV ownership? Can you think of anything?
I mean, I would just say that it, like I said, it does take a bit more planning, but I think once you get used to that, like when I bought my car, it's advertised at 383 kilometers of range. I'm certainly not getting that. I am regularly driving faster than the speed limit, and I know I could have significantly more range if I was not breaking rules every day. So part of that is my own behaviors. Like in the winter, I'm like steering wheel, heated seat, like everything on. Though I think that speaks to what Michael was talking about, which is that I will like willingly turn all of that on, and it's not enough that it impacts my commute or gives me range anxiety despite that. When I first got my car, it kind of was like, oh, I can charge it like every couple days, and kind of the same way that you just get gas when you need it. And what I realized pretty quickly, I don't know if the others can speak to this as well, but for me, it's definitely like take a charge when you can get it. So, you know, if you're parked somewhere and there's a charger available, plug it in. You know, if you're at home and you can do that, like it's not something that I wait for anymore. I definitely don't try to play that game. If it's available, then I'll take it always. But once I kind of got used to that, I wouldn't say, you know, road trips take a bit more planning, but I agree with Holden, like you can have some time to like stretch or like see places you wouldn't have seen, get out and stretch your legs. And again, like that infrastructure has changed so much in 3 years with the availability of chargers. And I know, I think it's like Petrochem that's putting fast chargers everywhere, so you can get back on your corn nuts, Holden, like no worries. Stop at the gas station to get your electricity. I mean, I will admit that like most of the time on a trip, we will take my partner's car, which is a diesel Golf. But I think when I compare like the 40,000 kilometers a year that I'm doing commuting to like the 5,000 or less that I'm doing of traveling, I think that's still a pretty big impact overall.
Awesome. I will just start reading out a couple of the questions that I feel would be relevant to many people. Maybe not everyone had the chance to read them. Again, some of our panelists have answered the questions already, so you can always go back into the Q&A yourself and read, but I'll just address a couple of common themes that came up. And one question that I thought I had never really seen answered was, for example, what happened with that was earlier on in our conversation. What about motorcycles? We have so many motorcycles on the highway. Is there a plan to electrify motorcycles? And I would give that to Michael, I think.
Yeah, there definitely are some electric motorcycles on the market. There's a startup, well, I mean, they're well established now, but called Zero Motorcycles. And they're probably the most popular one. And then other manufacturers are kind of getting into that too. Most notably, Harley Davidson did make the Livewire. But yeah, I mean, the electric motorcycles are amazing. They have great range. It's, again, just surreal to be on a motorcycle that has just insane amounts of torque right away. Doesn't shift, just goes and goes and goes. I think the in Vancouver, the VPD and maybe the city, I'm not sure about the city, have already been using electric motorcycles a bit. They're definitely out there. Those are, you can get street bikes and kind of dual sport for the most part, but there are some kind of like motocross bikes starting to emerge too. And then while we're on this topic, there is a Canadian company called Taiga that is making snow machines and I think some watercraft, like sort of like jet ski type things as well as Bombardier for like the Sea-Doo and Ski-Doo. They're coming out with electric models. Polaris has, I believe it's Polaris that has sort of like a utility side-by-side, but are producing like more of the kind of full speed performance side-by-side as well over the next couple of years. And that stuff is under that specialty use vehicle incentive, if you want to look into rebates on those too.
Awesome, thank you. Quite a wealth of information. I'll just keep us moving on. There's so many questions. I really want to make sure we address as many as possible, if that's okay. One question that came up I thought would be really interesting for the drivers, the commuters themselves to answer is, one question is, do you feel the better handling characteristics of the EVs reduce the need for an all-wheel drive? That person is trying to decide between SUV versus sedan.
So I've commuted to Whistler in my current role for 3 years, and prior to that for many other years in my life. I've actually never owned an all-wheel drive vehicle, and I've never had any difficulty. I find that this car in particular is really good in the snow, I guess, because it's so heavy. The only thing that was a bit of a learning curve, if anyone gets one between now and this winter, was the regenerative braking. So when you take your foot off the accelerator, you are not just coasting, you are actively slowing down. And definitely, like my first couple drives in the snow, I just ripped my foot off and did a little slide, and I was like, oopsie, like this doesn't work quite the same. A couple people in my life were like, why don't you just drive it in like drive mode, which doesn't use the regenerative braking? But by the time it was winter, I was so used to not using my brakes anymore that like that's kind of the better way to go. And it just took like a couple flips, and then I figured it out, and it's awesome. It's amazing in the snow. And like I said, it's our preferred vehicle. We have the option to take a diesel car, but we always pick the EV on the weekends when we're skiing.
Awesome.
Yeah, I could just kind of echo what I think someone said earlier, that like because these are modern vehicles with electric motors and a lot of kind of sensors, they can allocate power very carefully between the different front and rear and left and right. And so I can't speak for all the vehicles, but it's my understanding that most of them are in the highest safety ratings due to things like that. And that was a very small part of our decision, given kind of commuting along the Sea to Sky in the winter. It's just nice to have those active kind of those little gremlins working for you under the hood.
Awesome. So I keep moving then through the questions. I go a little bit randomly. Just I have my notes where many similar questions came up. So I thought if we can talk about them first, that would make sense. So one of the also common themes was around batteries, around battery lifespan. How long do they live? Do they need to be replaced? What would it cost? Are they safe? What's the environmental footprint? Like there's a lot of talk about interest in the batteries themselves, if any of you feel comfortable addressing that.
Well, I can say a few things broadly, and I think it looks like Holden probably, I think was going to say something too. But yeah, I see some questions around, so the environmental impact of batteries, and of course, manufacturing a battery does require a bunch of materials and a bunch of energy to make it. And so you'll kind of see this argument that electric vehicles are actually worse than gas vehicles because of mostly the energy that goes into making the batteries, because the factories use electricity to put these batteries together. So first thing that I want to point out is that any emissions associated with making the battery are really just dependent on the grid. And over the past few years, we've seen the grids in places where the batteries are made become more and more renewable based. So the kilograms per kilowatt hour of making the batteries has about halved. But batteries have gotten, again, twice as big at the same time. Though if you compare that to, so that basically like the manufacturer of a new car or a new gas car versus an EV, the EV might take up to, double the amount of energy to make because of those batteries. But what people need to understand is just the sheer amount of emissions produced from using gasoline. And typically in BC, driving an electric vehicle will offset the emissions from manufacturing it in about 40,000 kilometers, just comparing sort of average vehicles. So a lot of us are cranking that out in maybe a year and a half. And this also figures into questions that I've been getting more and more about, like, is it better for the environment to just keep the vehicle that I already have, or get an electric vehicle? And this comes from people who are really, really motivated to do the best thing. And before I got into this space, I drove a Toyota Echo hatchback because it's pretty much the lowest emission thing I could find for the least amount of money. And I kind of thought that, like, yeah, it'd be better to just keep this, but it's just not the case. Even in about that 40,000 kilometers, it'd still be better to just buy an electric vehicle. So yeah, just get into the electric as soon as you can. Switching gears just to talk about battery recycling. I know some people pointed this out in the chat as well. I don't know, in the media and stuff, you tend to hear of the example of, there's going to be millions of electric vehicle batteries in landfills. And I think it'd be hard pressed to take an electric vehicle battery to a landfill. And they're just like, sure, yeah, bring it in, whatever. But what actually happens is a lot of the batteries actually go back to the manufacturers if a vehicle's been in a crash or something. The manufacturers want those back. They want to see what's been happening with the batteries. The battery materials are also super valuable. Just search for Nissan Leaf batteries on eBay. You'll find used batteries. You'll find batteries that are taken apart to make smaller batteries. They're just really, really valuable components. And in Canada, we do have companies who are making a profit recycling EV battery materials. Li-Cycle is one. One in Richmond called American Manganese. And then BC has recently announced that I think it's 2026, EV batteries will just be sort of like more formally part of the battery recycling process. So if you buy an EV now, by the time it's off warranty, it will be well just like established as part of the kind of normal recycling process in BC. But yeah, they can be recycled. There's companies all over North America who are doing it. If not using them in other energy applications, before that, there are groups who take these batteries and use them, for energy storage and solar projects, and communities who are still on diesel generators and that kind of thing. So the nice thing about batteries is they get made once, and then they're going to service your vehicle for probably longer than your vehicle holds together. And then maybe I'll just ask for anyone else on the call if they've ever had to replace a battery in their car.
I will be soon. I mean,
well, yeah, you have the Bolt.
Yeah, so I don't know if people have heard about this, and I really don't want it to turn anyone off of getting an EV, but there has been this rather large recall of every Bolt ever made, of getting of a full battery replacement. And I think that is too bad, but also as an early adopter of a new technology, things happen and there's learning, and I will be getting a new battery. Fortunately for me, my new battery actually will have more range than the one I currently have. And also my warranty is starting again at 0 kilometers. And I was going to expire my warranty well before the 8 years because of the amount that I drive. So, it's unfortunate that it's happening, but for me as one individual person, it's a bit of a personal win. But, and I think it's good to hear what Michael's talking about kind of the value of recycling and getting those materials back. And so the manufacturer will be taking my battery back and putting a new one in within the next few months, I believe.
Yeah, just to kind of tie that up about the battery recycling, we're extracting roughly 95% of the valuable metals from batteries already. And that whole recycling industry is in its infancy. So all those Bolt batteries are not just going to go in a landfill somewhere. Those are super valuable. We just have to rework them, take them apart and put them in. And I think a lot of the automobile manufacturers are going to be running into battery supply issues in the coming years. They're very valuable. And so once we've pulled those metals out of the earth, we're not going to keep pulling from the earth if we can afford to. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
There was a question there around maybe the lifetime of your battery or something like that. Are you going to replace the battery, that kind of thing? And I think in general, we're looking at very long battery lifetimes for the kind of modern generation of batteries. If you buy a vehicle now, you're looking at least a couple 100,000 kilometers, in my understanding. Again, each manufacturer will be different, but I was just looking up Tesla's. Theirs is a warranty of 192,000 kilometers with 70% retention. So you'll lose a little bit of charge, but it'll be nothing like your cell phone or laptop, which are really not treating their batteries nicely. These are world-class electrical systems. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, great information. I am learning so much. Just to shift gears a little bit, there were a couple of questions just now around road trips. If anyone has taken their car on a road trip yet. There was also one question, to the EV owners too, are you driving more now because you feel less guilty? And then very specifically, has anyone taken an EV over the Hurley FSR into Pemberton? So that's more specific. I leave it to you.
I did do one long trip to Vernon. I will say the way there was very chaotic. I left Squamish without a full charge. We were kind of chasing that the whole way. I was lucky I had my sister co-piloting and looking at all the apps. However, the way back, there was a lot of learning. That was only 4 or 5 months after I got my car. On the way back, we actually only had 2 stops. So it wasn't even really significantly different than when I had my gas vehicle previously. So we left Vernon, we came over the 97C, we stopped in Merritt for maybe half an hour, and then we stopped in Hope for another half an hour after going over the Coquihalla. And I had plenty of range still when I came home. So actually we didn't even need to take as long for charging as we did. It was more of like a better safe than sorry kind of thing. I use my car regularly for shorter road trips over to the Sunshine Coast. Some of my family lives over there. So yeah, we take my car for that all the time. I went to Powell River camping this summer, loaded all the stuff up in the back, came back with 2 spare kids and all the gear. So I don't know, it's pretty good. Yeah, I will say, like, for longer trips, we went to Fernie a couple years ago and we definitely, you know, picked the diesel car for that. But most of the time, if it's kind of something we can do within one charge, we'll always take my car instead. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's any other comments to that? Sounds like road trips are being more and more doable if planned right.
Yeah. What were the other parts of that question, Louisa? I have not specifically driven over the Hurley, I will say that.
If you would drive more now that you feel less guilty about the environment.
Oh yeah, someone actually mentioned that in our last panel that we did in the summertime, and I would say definitely not. Like, I live in downtown Squamish. On the weekends I park my car and I'm walking or riding my bike pretty much everywhere. It's really just for me to get to work and back.
Awesome. Michael, did you want to add to that?
Oh, I was just gonna say something, just really briefly, because I've driven you know, quite a lot in BC, and most of it using a Volkswagen e-Golf, which is rated at a 200-kilometer range, and that's generous. The way electric vehicle road trips work is that you're not really like charging from 0 to 100% at a fast charger. You know, you're never really, you know, arriving with like, you know, 1 or 2% left, because the fast chargers are fairly common. But when you're charging the vehicle around like 80%, the charge rate starts to taper off so that the battery doesn't get damaged. It's like filling a balloon with water. You don't just like, you know, fill it, you know, maximum to as much as it can hold, you know, full on. You got to kind of like taper it off. So anyways, what it usually looks like is you're charging up to about, you know, 75 or 80%, and then moving on to the next station, you know, wherever that is, a few hundred kilometers down the road, and doing sort of like a shorter charge there. So it looks more like, especially in like a shorter range vehicle like that, more frequent kind of, you know, like 10, 15-minute stops. So, and I just want to throw that out there because I know there's a lot of things we didn't get to about cost and used vehicles. So, you know, if you're someone who's looking at an EV and you do the occasional long road trip, that's kind of what you're going to be looking at. Is the range isn't as big and the charging speeds aren't quite as fast, but it's still very, very doable. And yeah, you're going to be doing just some like more frequent, shorter stops.
Super.
Yeah, to follow on that, there was a question around the rapidly changing, improving technologies coming out every year. I'd love Michael and actually anyone else's thoughts on this, but from kind of where I was inside the industry, I think we're really at a, not a plateau, but we're at like a really stable base now, where previously we were making a lot of compromises in terms of how we cool the batteries and that kind of thing. Now we're like at this really comfortable spot where we have kind of no compromise vehicles. And there's always this elusive like solid state battery or ultra capacitor or whatever else that we've been rumored to have coming for like 30 years now and hasn't gotten here. But what we can say now is that like using the current batteries that we currently have and the largest thing humans have ever built that's connected, which is the electric grid, like we have a viable solution for almost everyone, at least on a daily basis, maybe not on their super long road trips or whatever, but like most people are driving I mean, Michael probably knows the number, less than like 50 kilometers a day. Like there's no reason that we still need to be polluting in those cases. So as Michael said, even some of the used EVs that you can buy online that are more available can handle that just fine. So I would say don't necessarily just wait for, 6 months or the next year out. I would say, as far as I know, there's no kind of quantum level jump coming out. We'll always have some incremental improvement, but our motors are around 95% efficient. If you hand wind motors, which my company did, you can get up to like 98% efficient, but really those differences are really small now. What you see out there, especially in the brand new category, is kind of going to be it, I think, for a little while. But maybe other people have opinions on that.
I will leave it there. We're getting close to 8:30. And I really didn't want to take anyone's time. There's still a couple of answers in there. Holden and other panelists did a great job answering. Thank you so much. This is so valuable. Lori, Sarah, Holden, this is really amazing to have you. I wanted to finish up by providing some of the resources, and I wanted to let Michael talk about that. Just where you can find some of the resources he was talking about. But if ever there's other questions that you are wondering or you would like me to find out, feel free to write an email to me under climatechange@whistler.ca, or we will send a follow-up email. We'll provide some information too, and the recording of this webinar, and it will be on the whistler.ca webpage under climate action. You'll find it there. And I give it to Michael to introduce us or remind us of the valuable resources you can find.
Yeah, thanks, Louisa. And I've mentioned this before, but it's the emotivebc.ca site. You'll find our electric vehicle brochure here, and you'll also find a questions form on the main page or on the homepage, so you can ask us questions through that. There's a FAQ section that has some animated vignettes on common topics, and then more FAQ questions after that. And you'll also find the Live Electric stories that people are constantly submitting to us, and I publish them as much as I get a chance to get them up on the website. Oh, and there is also on the homepage an events calendar, and our event season is starting to wind up, but you can check in there or just like follow us on Facebook or Instagram if you're looking for more of these webinars or even some test drive events. And I think we have one more slide. Right, there's my email if you want to get in touch with me directly, or use the message form again at emotivebc.ca. And by all means, reach out to a friend or neighbor who has an electric vehicle, because they're probably really eager to tell you about it.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Michael, for your wealth of information. That is fantastic. I will stop sharing and we will end the webinar here. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.